She was supposed to be a joke. Two poor twin girls pushed onto a school stage just to be laughed at, but when they opened their mouths, silence fell, and a single dad's quiet life was never the same again. Before we begin this unforgettable journey of music, healing, and second chances, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are rare, and sometimes just one voice can change everything. Now let me tell you what really happened. The snow had arrived early in the Nebraska plains that year. By mid-November, the wind had already swept white over the cracked roads, and the trees stood bare like skeletons aching for spring. Sawyer Whitlock tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his old Ford pickup, the windshield wipers swiping against flurries of sleet. The heater sputtered warm air inconsistently, just like everything else in his life lately. He had made this drive 1,000 times from the lumberyard back to his weathered cabin, nestled at the edge of Pine Hollow. But something felt different that day. A stillness so profound it made the road feel like it was holding its breath. It was then that he saw it. Just past the bend near the abandoned railard, a rusted shipping container stood with its doors half ajar, slightly swaying in the wind. At first he might have passed it like usual, but a flicker of movement, a small frantic hand slapping the metal seized him. Sawyer slammed the brakes. Gravel crunched beneath the tires as the truck skidded slightly before stopping. Without thinking, he flung open the door and bolted through the snow. Each gust of wind sliced through his coat, but he barely noticed. As he reached the container, he heard a tiny whimpers. No singing. Faint, cracked humming like a lullaby remembered in fear. He yanked the door open fully, and his breath caught in his throat. Inside, curled against a moldy blanket, were two girls, twins no older than 10. Their cheeks were flushed raw from the cold lips trembling. One of them looked up, eyes wide but unafraid. The other held a small paper snowflake in her hand, now damp and torn. "Please," the first one whispered. "Don't tell them we hid here." Sawyer didn't ask questions. He just shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around both of them. "We need to get you warm. Come on." The girls hesitated. "Are you going to call someone?" One asked. "I might," he said honestly, lifting the lighter of the two into his arms. "But right now, I'm going to save your lives." Back at his cabin, the wood stove roared as heat began to thaw there. Sawyer set down mugs of warm cocoa on the table while the girls, now in dry clothes, sat close together under a quilt. "What are your names?" he asked gently. Junie said to the bolder one. "She's Lyra. We're twins. I'm in 3 to 4. He smiled faintly. "That's pretty exact." Junie nodded. "Our mom always said numbers matter." "Where is she now?" Junie looked down. She laughed. "Aunt Carla's supposed to take care of us, but she said if we cried one more time, she'd leave us in the woods." Sawyer swallowed hard. The past always had a cruel way of circling back. He'd heard too many stories like this. Some ended with hope, most with headlines. He stood and walked into the hallway, knocking gently on a door. "Maisie," he called. "You okay in there?" There was no response. There rarely was. Maisie hadn't spoken in nearly 2 years. Not since the day she was carried out of her middle school auditorium after fainting on stage. The teasing, the whispers, the spotlight, it had broken something in her. Diagnosed with selective mutism, she had become a ghost in her own home, speaking only in glances and gestures. Sawyer thought maybe naively that bringing these girls into the house, even for just a night, might stir something in her. He didn't expect miracles, but a moment of connection, a sign of light. Back in the living room, Lyra hummed softly as she sipped her cocoa. The melody was almost aimless, yet strangely comforting. Junie closed her eyes, then joined in 2 soft, imperfect voices intertwining like old harmony lines, meeting again after years apart. From down the hallway, the door creaked open. Maisie appeared barefoot in her oversized flannel shirt, her eyes locked on the twins. She didn't speak, but she stood there and listened. Sawyer froze, watching his daughter with a quiet awe. She hadn't even looked at a stranger in months. Now she stood still, her eyes damp with something that looked like memory or maybe longing. Junie smiled at her. "Hi, you can sit with Yus if you want." Maisie didn't move, but she didn't leave either. She leaned against the doorframe and tilted her head like she was remembering a song she hadn't dared sing. That night, after the girls had fallen asleep on the pull-out couch, Sawyer sat alone in the kitchen with an untouched cup of coffee. The air smelled like old pine wood and cinnamon toast. He stared at the wooden box on the shelf across from him, a small recording box with a built-in mic, the kind used by songwriters in the old days. Inside were the last recordings his wife had made with Maisie before she passed. Lullabies, giggles, whispered harmonies. They hadn't been played in 2 years. Just like the piano in the corner. Just like the man who used to believe music could save people. But something about Junie and Lyra, it reminded him of the old days. The simplicity of melody, the strength in bare, unpolished voices. Sawyer reached for the box, and for the first time in years, he opened it. The next morning came quietly without fanfare. Just a pale gray light spilling through the frost-laced windows and the creak of wood settling in the cold. Sawyer stirred first automatically, reaching for the coffee pot as if muscle memory were stronger than sleep. He didn't say much, not even to himself. He never had to. The quiet had long since become part of the walls, but today there were 3 extra breaths in that silence. The twins were still asleep on the fold-out couch, their arms tangled like the vines of a single root. Sawyer watched them for a long moment before lighting the stove. The flames crackled. The air warmed. Something shifted inside him, soft and unfamiliar, like a note played on a guitar that hadn't been tuned in years but still sang true. He didn't want to name it. He just let it be. Maisie was already sitting at the kitchen table when he returned with 2 chipped mugs of cocoa. She hadn't made a sound coming in. She never did. She sat with her back straight, hands folded, eyes on the steam curling up from her own cup. She didn't touch it. Her long dark hair hung loosely around her face, curtaining her expression the way words no longer could. Sawyer sat across from her and waited. That was their dance, a stillness in which he offered presence and she on the rare occasion offered the same. "You okay with them staying a bit?" he asked quietly. Maisie didn't respond, but her fingers curled slightly around the cup. That was a yes. He nodded. "Good, I think they need it. And maybe we do too." She looked up at that just for a second, enough for him to see her eyes. Those same eyes that used to sparkle when her mother sang to her on the back porch, long before the silence moved in. Later that morning, Junie and Lyra stirred awake, groggy but smiling. They helped set the table unasked, clinking spoons and giggling at the worn-down toaster that liked to burn only one side of the bread. Maisie watched from the hallway, half shielded by the frame. She was still a shadow in her own home. Lyra spotted her and waved. "We saved you the red plate. It's the only one with no chips." Maisie hesitated, then stepped forward. Slowly she took the plate in both hands and sat at the table. Sawyer held his breath. 3 girls, 1 table. No word spoken, but something far better. Laughter, breath, belonging. The snow outside kept falling. School was canceled. The roads were quiet. The house, for once, wasn't. Sawyer pulled out a set of old board games from the hall closet and let the girls argue over rules that no one remembered. Maisie didn't speak. But when Junie accidentally toppled the entire Monopoly bank, it was Maisie who knelt to help her rebuild. The smile that passed between them was enough to light the fireplace twice over. After dinner, the twins began to hum again, low and casual, the kind of tune children make up when they're safe. Maisie stood nearby watching. Something in her posture changed. Her shoulders relaxed, her head tilted just slightly like a flower toward light. Then it happened. A single note escaped her lips. Soft, barely audible, but unmistakable. Sawyer froze mid-step in the kitchen. He turned but said nothing. Junie noticed, 2 eyes wide. "You're singing," she said gently. Maisie blinked and bolted. Sawyer found her in the garage, curled up in the back seat of the old station wagon they never used anymore. The cold didn't seem to bother her. Her breath came out in tiny clouds. Her arms wrapped around her knees. He didn't open the door right away, just stood outside, hand on the frosted handle. "I heard you," he said finally. And it was beautiful. Silence. "You don't have to be afraid of your own voice, Maisie. Not here." A pause. "Then I wasn't afraid," she whispered, barely more than air. "I forgot that I could." They sat together in the cold for a long while. No lectures, no pressure, just shared stillness. The kind that tells the truth without needing translation. Sawyer remembered how he used to think music would save her some magical song that would make everything right. But now he knew better. It wasn't music that saved people. It was being heard. That night after the twins had gone to bed, Sawyer brought down the old guitar case from the attic. Dust puffed up as he opened it, revealing the worn, honey-cold body of the Tor. He hadn't touched it in over a decade. Maisie stood in the doorway, eyes wide. She said nothing but took 2 steps forward. "You remember this?" he asked softly. She nodded. He sat down, too,